I wasn't supposed to be there. That's the part that messes with me the most. If I hadn't worked late, if I hadn't left my charger at the office, if traffic hadn't been light for once on the Eisenhower, maybe I never would have seen what I saw. Maybe I'd still be asleep next to a woman I thought I knew. But instead, I walked into O'Malley's on Madison, soaked from the drizzle outside, just looking for a beer and a burger before heading home. My usual place was packed, and this bar, O'Malley's, was right across from my office. I figured I'd stop in, eat something greasy, maybe skim the news and call it a night. The bar was dim, low ceilings, booths lining the walls, TVs playing muted sports highlights. It was the kind of place people went to be left alone or to be noticed, rarely both. I saw her right away, Sarah. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She hadn't mentioned being downtown that day. She told me she'd be working from home. But there she was, seated in a booth by the window, laughing, leaning forward like she didn't want to miss a word. And across from her, Dan. He worked in her department. The guy I'd shaken hands with maybe twice, the kind of coworker you know by name but never really have a reason to talk to. He had that overconfident lean to him, the kind of posture that said he was used to being listened to. Sarah's body language told the rest of the story. The way she angled her knee toward him under the table, how she twirled her hair when she laughed. Her hand was resting on the table, fingers lightly touching the stem of his glass like it was second nature. I didn't move right away. I stood there, maybe 30 feet away, by the end of the bar near the restrooms, just watching. I told myself it might be nothing. Maybe it was a work dinner. Maybe they were talking strategy or budgets, or whatever people in marketing talk about when they're not scheming slide decks. But that hope lasted all of 5 seconds. Dan reached across the table and brushed something off Sarah's collar. Something invisible, I'm sure. She smiled. Not politely, genuinely. Warm. Familiar. The way she used to smile at me when we first started dating, before the house, before the overtime, before the silences. And then she laughed. That laugh, God, that laugh. I hadn't heard it in months. Not in our kitchen. Not in our bed. Not during any of our lifeless conversations about laundry or groceries. It was the kind of laugh you let out when you're not thinking about anyone else being in the room. My stomach dropped. I should have left. I should have walked out and never mentioned a word. But instead I walked over. Calm, deliberate, like I was visiting an old friend. She didn't notice me until I was 2 steps from the table. Her eyes widened just slightly when she looked up. That was the first crack in the act. Just for a second, she looked like someone who had been caught stealing. "Mark," she said, her voice rising. "What are you doing here?" She glanced at Dan, then back to me. Her smile was quick, too quick, like someone flipping on a porch light during a blackout. "I was just grabbing a bite," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just reached for my wedding ring, the gold band that had lived on my finger for the last 9 years, and twisted it off. Dan shifted in his seat. Sarah's eyes followed my hand as I set the ring gently, purposefully, onto the edge of her plate, right on top of a cold, half-eaten shrimp. There was a second of silence. Even the buzz of the bar seemed to dip. I heard a couple of murmurs from a table nearby. A fork dropped somewhere behind me. Sarah's smile flickered. "Okay, what's this?" she said, laughing nervously. "Mark, come on. Don't be dramatic. This is just Dan. We're having a late dinner. We're working on the Kessler project." Dan stayed quiet. Coward. I looked at her. Not Dan. Just her. "You told me you were working from home today." She blinked. Yeah, I was. But this came up last minute." "Last minute," I repeated. She sat up straighter, angling herself like she was trying to control the narrative. "Look, I don't know what this looks like, but there's nothing going on. We're just decompressing. It's been a long week." Dan finally found his voice. "Maybe we should talk in private." I cut him off with a glance. Sarah reached for the ring, but her fingers hovered over it, unsure. She didn't pick it up, just looked at it like it had morphed into something unrecognizable. "We're not doing this here," she said, her voice quieter now. "Let's go outside. Okay?" But I didn't move. I gave her a small nod, nothing dramatic, nothing loud. and I walked out. No yelling, no accusations. Just that ring sitting on her plate like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I didn't write. I walked into that bar a husband, and left it as something else. I remember the wind hitting me outside, how cold it felt even though it wasn't that cold. I remember the way the streetlights looked fuzzier than usual, like the air itself didn't want to hold their shape anymore. I stood under one for a while, watching taxis roll by, wondering how long they'd stay in that booth pretending this didn't happen. Because that's what she'd do, pretend. She'd spin it into something harmless. I was overreacting. She was just blowing off steam. It was all innocent. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The worst part? I think she knew I knew. And somehow that didn't stop her. The sky started to spit rain again as I walked back to my car. I didn't rush. What was the point? Nothing urgent waited for me anymore. The ring-shaped indent on my finger itched. I rubbed it absently, like touching it might undo everything. Didn't. After that night at the bar, nothing felt real anymore. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe things finally started to feel real for the first time in months. The way Sarah looked at me when I dropped the ring on her plate. That wasn't shock. That wasn't guilt. That was annoyance. Like I'd interrupted a perfectly good evening. She didn't come home that night. She texted me around midnight. Staying with Jenna. We'll talk in the morning. Jenna, her best friend since college. The one she always used as a fallback when she needed a convenient alibi. But what Sarah didn't know, or maybe forgot, was that Jenna and I had talked not long ago at a cookout. She'd mentioned something about starting night shifts at the hospital again. There was no way she was hosting anyone, let alone my wife. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Instead, I sat on the couch in the dark, phone on the coffee table, just staring at the blank TV screen. The ring was still in my pocket. I kept rolling it between my fingers like a worry stone. Everything was starting to click into place. The signs I'd ignored, the moments I dismissed as stress or coincidence. You never think it's going to be you. The next morning, Sarah breezed through the door like she hadn't just detonated our marriage in public. Hair tied back, coffee in hand. She looked at me on the couch like I was the one who owed her an explanation. "Can we just talk about this like adults?" she asked, setting her purse down. But I didn't want her version of the story. I wanted the truth. And at that point, I knew I wasn't going to get it from her. So I started digging. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow unraveling. Like pulling threads from an old sweater until the whole thing lay in pieces on the floor. I wasn't looking to catch her in some explosive, cinematic way. I just wanted to know if the version of my life I'd been living was ever real in the first place. First thing I checked was our shared credit card statement. We didn't have separate finances, something I used to take as a sign of trust. I opened the account on my laptop and started scrolling. Pattern emerged fast. Dinners. Not cheap ones either. 2 or 3 times a week, mostly downtown. The names of the restaurants stood out. Places we talked about going together but never did because she always said we were tight on money. There were hotel charges too. Not for overnight stays, no, these were subtler. Day bookings. Midday check-ins. Sometimes in Minneapolis. Which was strange, because Sarah had been making a lot of business trips there lately. I opened my messages and found one from 3 weeks ago. Heading to Minneapolis tomorrow for the quarterly review. I'll be back Thursday night. Now I knew what the review actually was. Still, I told myself I needed more than suspicious receipts and feelings. That was the rational part of me, trying to protect her or maybe still trying to protect us. So I went to the next level. I opened her location sharing on Find My iPhone. We used to share our locations by default. Back when things were easy. It was a leftover feature from those days. She never turned it off. Until recently. When I tried to check her location, it just said, "Not available." I checked my own phone to make sure the setting hadn't changed. Nope, she'd disabled hers. That was confirmation enough for me to go deeper. The next day, while she was at work, or wherever she was claiming to be, I checked the bathroom trash. I know how pathetic that sounds, but I had to be sure. Buried under tissues and a cotton ball soaked in eye makeup remover were 2 receipts. One for a boutique lingerie shop I'd never heard of. The other was from a perfume store, the kind of perfume she hadn't worn around me. Not once. She wasn't dressing up for me. She wasn't staying late for projects. And she definitely wasn't being careful. I started to make a list. Turned off location sharing. Frequent trips to Minneapolis. Receipts from restaurants we never went to. Dresses showing up in the laundry I'd never seen her wear. New makeup she didn't bother wearing at home. Phone always face down. Even in the shower. Texts from work at midnight. Mood swings. Hot and cold like a light switch. And then there was Jenna. I called her the following week. I kept it casual. Asked how the hospital was, how night shifts were going. She sounded tired but friendly. I waited until the end to ask, "Hey, did Sarah stay with you last Thursday?" There was a pause. "Thursday?" she repeated. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone light. "She texted me that she crashed at your place." "Oh," Jenna said slowly. "I haven't seen Sarah in a few weeks, actually. But I'm sure she just meant she was nearby or something." "No worries," I said quickly. "Just checking." We hung up. I sat in the kitchen with the phone still in my hand. The walls felt like they were closing in. I wanted to be wrong, but I wasn't. Everything pointed in one direction, and it wasn't a happy one. That weekend, Sarah told me she had to go back to Minneapolis for a conference. She packed her suitcase with new clothes I didn't recognize. Things that looked expensive. She wore heels she hadn't touched in years. The same red lipstick she wore the night I saw her with Dan. "Don't wait up," she said before leaving. The schedule's packed. I watched her walk out the door without saying a word. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. Because I already knew. That night, I went to her desk in the study. She had always kept a personal laptop there, separate from the one she used for work. It was older, a little dusty. I didn't think much of it. Assumed she barely touched it anymore. But when I opened it, it was fully charged. Password protected, of course. And I guessed wrong twice before I tried our wedding anniversary. It worked. The first thing I saw was the desktop background. A photo. Her and Dan. Taken at what looked like a corporate party. She was wearing the same black dress from a work event a few months back. His hand was on her lower back. Hers on his chest. They looked like a couple, comfortable, smiling, caught mid-laugh. The background was just the start. There were folders labeled innocently, trips, meetings, events, but when I opened them, it was like watching a movie of someone else's life. Someone who looked like my wife, sounded like her, but didn't feel like her anymore. Photo after photo. Sarah and Dan at restaurants, in hotel lobbies, at airport lounges. Some were selfies. Others were clearly taken by third parties. I even found videos, short clips. One of them laughing as he tucked her hair behind her ear. I sat there for a long time, not crying, not even angry yet, just numb. That laptop was the end of any reasonable doubt. All the signs I'd ignored for months were now screaming in my face. And somehow, the saddest part wasn't that she cheated. It was that I'd let it get this far without saying anything. I'd let her drift so far out that I barely recognized who we were anymore. Maybe that was on me. Maybe not. But I knew one thing. The man who used to believe her stories was gone. And the man sitting there now, he was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. After everything I saw on her laptop, sleep didn't feel like an option. I just sat there in the office, lights dim, her laughter playing on repeat from a video file I hadn't even meant to open. I must have watched it 5 times. They were sitting on a blanket in some park. Dan cracking jokes, Sarah tossing her head back like nothing in the world had ever been funnier. She looked light, unburdened, like she hadn't in years. I wanted to believe she'd just lost herself for a moment, that this was some midlife crisis blip, a mistake. But it wasn't. The photos said otherwise. So did the folder labeled, "For Us." I almost didn't open it. The name was too cruel. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside were PDFs, travel itineraries, hotel reservations, spa packages. All dated, all coordinated. Minneapolis, Denver, Charleston. Places she told me were for training, team building, or just long meetings. And there was one more thing, a Word doc titled Winter Plans. It was a half-written list. A dream itinerary. Ski trip. Telluride. New Year's in Montreal. Get matching gloves. Try that oyster place in Vancouver. Don't forget to bring the red dress. Dan likes it. That last line made my throat tighten. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how casually she handed pieces of herself to him. Little details. Things she used to reserve for us. After that, something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way. Just a final letting go. Whatever I'd been holding on to, whatever version of Sarah I thought I was protecting, it was gone. She was gone. What was left was someone who had turned our life into a background story while she built a new one starring someone else. By the time I shut the laptop, the sky was starting to lighten. I remember standing at the window, watching the orange creep in behind the skyline. The city was waking up. But in that moment, I felt like I'd finally gone to sleep. Emotionally, mentally. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollow. She came home the next day, suitcase in hand, looking tired. She dropped her keys into the bowl by the door like nothing had happened. I didn't say a word, just nodded. "Everything okay?" she asked, unpacking like we were still playing house. I gave a half smile and said, "Sure." And in that moment, I realized something. She didn't think I knew. She still believed the mask was working. That terrified me more than anything, that she thought she could lie this effortlessly and still have me. So I started to prepare. I made copies of everything. **TS of emails, photos from the folders, even the Winter Plans doc. I saved it all to an external hard drive and hid it inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf. I logged into our shared cloud accounts and quietly started downloading duplicates of anything with financial significance. Bank records, tax returns, even Netflix account data. Not because I needed it, because I didn't want her rewriting the history of our life after she walked away from it. One night, I waited until she fell asleep, then tiptoed into the bedroom and grabbed her phone. It was face down, like always, plugged in next to her side of the bed. I unlocked it, same code as always, and opened her photo app. What I found there wasn't surprising anymore. Selfies with Dan. Restaurant *TS with their drinks pressed together like a toast. Candids of her laughing, him looking at her like he already knew she was his. I scrolled through until I found a folder labeled with a single emoji. Speech balloon. Inside were *TS of their texts. Nothing overtly *Zool. But emotional? Absolutely. The kind of conversations you only have with someone when you've let all your guard down. Dan, I wish you could stay longer this time. Sarah, me too. It's getting harder to leave. Dan, you don't have to. You know that, right? Sarah, I know. But not yet. Dan, you say that every time. Sarah, just trust me. I'm working on it. Dan, I don't want to be a secret forever. Sarah, you won't be. I don't know how long I stood there, just reading. My hands were shaking. I locked the phone and set it back down before she stirred. That line, "You won't be a secret forever," kept playing in my head like a song I couldn't get rid of. So this wasn't just an affair. It was a transition. She was phasing me out. And Dan? He wasn't some fling. He was the promotion. The next act. A few days later, I started testing her. Subtle things. Asking where she'd been, watching her eyes. Noticing the pauses. The gentle redirects. One night I asked, "Do you ever think we should take a trip? Just the two of us?" She blinked. Now? Work's insane. Over the holidays, maybe. Montreal? Like we always talked about. She looked away. Montreal in winter is a nightmare, Mark. I almost laughed. Almost asked her if Dan knew she felt that way. But I didn't. Because this was no longer about confrontation. This was about clarity. I needed to see how far it would go. That's when I bought the audio recorder. It was small, smaller than a USB stick. Fit perfectly inside a hollow pen I kept on my desk. I didn't install spyware. I didn't go full spy thriller. I just left the recorder on whenever she had calls. I didn't even expect much. But what I got broke me in a way I wasn't ready for. She was on the phone with a friend one night. I think it was someone from her department. I played it back after she went to bed. Honestly, it's like he's furniture. Just there. Always. It's not that he's awful or anything, he's just not enough. I feel like I've outgrown him. She laughed. With Dan, it's like I'm seen. You know? Like I'm not a wife or a coworker or someone's daughter. I'm just me. And I didn't even know I missed that feeling until I had it again. There were others. Short snippets. Casual conversations where I became a punchline. A limitation. An anchor she wanted to cut loose. She wasn't just falling for someone else. She was erasing me. And the worst part was, she didn't sound cruel when she said those things. She sounded free. Like betrayal was just the tax she had to pay for becoming someone new. At that point, I had everything I needed. Proof, patterns, motive, timeline. But even then, I didn't confront her. I didn't pack my bags. Not yet. Because leaving would have meant she got to write the ending. She'd say I overreacted. That I misread things. That Dan was just a friend, that I had trust issues. But now I had the truth. And when you have the truth, you don't argue. You act. I started planning my exit. Quietly. Without drama. I rented a P.O. box under my name. Opened a private checking account. Set up paperless billing so nothing would tip her off. I even found a temporary apartment in Portland, out of state, out of reach. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. Couldn't fix us. I didn't even want to, but I could reclaim the parts of myself that she'd chipped away. And I could leave a message behind that would echo louder than any fight ever could. The moment I decided to leave wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slam doors. Just a quiet click inside me. Like a light switch turned off. It happened one evening while Sarah was on yet another late meeting. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my hands. I had the ring in my pocket again. I'd been carrying it for weeks like some kind of relic, a reminder of the person I used to be. I thought about how we'd gotten here. All the dinners where she barely looked up from her phone. The new clothes, the perfume. The way she laughed with Dan. And the audio files, God, the audio files. Hearing her describe me as furniture broke something in me that still hasn't healed. That night I realized something. She'd already left me. The only difference was she still had a key. So I started packing. Not in a frenzy. Not like in the movies where the betrayed spouse throws everything into a bag and storms out. This was careful. Methodical. I moved quietly from room to room, choosing what to take, what to leave. I packed my clothes first. Then the documents. Birth certificate, passport, tax returns, bank information. I copied all our shared accounts onto a flash drive and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Every time I opened a drawer, I found another ghost of our life together. A photo from our honeymoon. A ticket stub from a concert we never stopped talking about. Her handwriting on sticky notes, little reminders to buy milk or pick up dry cleaning. Once upon a time, those scribbles had meant we were a team. Now they just felt like evidence of a story that had ended long before I realized it. I took only what I needed. Clothes, files, a few personal items, my father's watch, a copy of The Old Man, and the sea she'd always teased me about reading every year. The rest I left untouched, because this wasn't about erasing myself. It was about leaving a clear line between before and after. On the kitchen counter, I placed an envelope. Inside was a letter. Not an accusation, not a manifesto. Just a list. It wasn't a list of her lies. It was a list of what had disappeared over the years. The sound of her laugh in the kitchen. The way she used to reach for my hand when we crossed the street. The plans we'd made for trips we never took. The late-night talks about nothing and everything. All of it had vanished so slowly I didn't even notice until it was gone. I wrote, "These are the things I missed before I missed you. These are the things you stopped noticing. These are the things I can't get back." No signature. No return address. Just the truth. I slid the envelope into the center of the table like a centerpiece. Next to it, I left my house keys. Then I walked through the house one last time. The living room still smelled faintly of her perfume. The bedroom, colder than I remembered, still had her clothes draped over a chair. I paused at the bookshelf. She'd always teased me for hoarding old paperbacks, calling it my little museum. I smiled at the thought, but it felt like remembering someone else's life. I stopped in front of the bathroom mirror. My face looked older, harder. Not just from the last few weeks, maybe from the last few years. There was a time when I'd have begged her to come back, when I'd have bargained away my self-respect just to keep the illusion of us intact. But that man was gone. I left quietly, closing the door behind me. The sound was final but soft. My car was already packed. In the trunk were 2 suitcases, a box of files, and a duffel bag filled with things that actually mattered to me. The flash drive with her emails and photos sat in the glove compartment, along with my new bank card and the lease for the apartment in Portland. I didn't look back. As I drove away, the house shrank in my rearview mirror until it was just another dark shape on a dark street. I expected to feel rage or triumph or even relief. Instead, I felt nothing, just a steady quiet. I checked into a motel off the interstate under a different name, paid cash. Sat on the edge of the bed with the TV on mute. Outside, cars hissed past in the rain. I pulled out my phone. There were 3 messages from Sarah. Where are you? We need to talk. Mark, please. Just come home. I turned the phone over and set it on the nightstand. She still didn't understand. She thought this was just another fight, another scene we'd sweep under the rug. She thought I'd come back once I cooled off. But there was no coming back. Not from this. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, maybe years, my chest didn't feel like it was being crushed. The silence wasn't empty, it was clean. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Packed up, checked out, got on the road. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Didn't tell anyone except my brother, who had promised to keep it quiet. By the time Sarah came home from whatever excuse she'd used that night, she'd find the envelope. She'd open it expecting rage or accusations or demands. Instead, she'd find a list of absences. A mirror held up to the slow erosion she'd either ignored or welcomed. And maybe, just maybe, she'd understand. I doubted it. But it wasn't for her anyway. It was for me. As the miles rolled under my tires, the city gave way to open highway. I passed familiar exits and then unfamiliar ones. Stopped for coffee at a gas station where no one knew me. Sat in the parking lot watching the steam rise from the cup. I thought about the years I'd spent building a life with someone who'd already decided to leave. About the man I'd become in the process. Smaller, quieter, like I was always apologizing for taking up space. I whispered a word under my breath. The same word I'd whispered once when she turned away from me to check her phone. Stay. This time it didn't feel like a plea. Felt like a farewell. By the time I crossed into Oregon, the sun was rising again. I rolled down the window and let the cold air hit my face. Somewhere back there, Sarah was probably calling friends, maybe even calling my mother, trying to find me. But she wouldn't, because for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't lost. I was gone. A few weeks after I left, after the dust of silence started to settle and I could finally hear my own thoughts again, I opened the folder. I hadn't touched it since I moved into the new place. It sat tucked away on the same flash drive that held all the proof. Emails, photos, reservations, documents that felt like evidence in a trial no one else would ever see. But the folder I hadn't opened yet was called audio. I didn't record them to trap her. I wasn't planning to use them in court. I didn't need them for leverage. I recorded them because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. Because in the final year of our marriage, Sarah had this way of making me question everything. If I asked why she was late, I was insecure. If I noticed she was distant, I was making things up. If I brought up how much time she was spending with Dan, she'd laugh and say I was being paranoid, that I needed to get over my jealous streak. Eventually, I started to believe it, that maybe I was the problem, that maybe I'd become so wrapped up in my own insecurities that I'd warped the truth around me. So I started recording not the obvious stuff, not the cheating, just conversations, background noise, the things she said when she thought I wasn't listening. The first file I played was from 3 months before I left. It was Sarah on the phone with someone, probably Tessa, her coworker. I remembered the night clearly. I was cooking dinner, and she was pacing the hallway just out of sight. I thought she was venting about work. Turns out I was wrong. It's not like he's a bad guy, she was saying. He's just flat, like wallpaper. I feel like I'm aging 5 years every time we sit in the same room. There was a laugh, hers sharp and bitter. She kept going. I swear, if he tells me one more time about his stupid workshop project, I might fake a seizure just to get out of the conversation. I paused the recording, stared at the wall, then hit play again. No, I haven't told him yet. What would I even say? Hey, by the way, I feel more alive in 10 minutes with Dan than I have in the last 2 years in this house? That's not exactly a hallmark moment. I stopped the audio. My jaw was tight. My heart wasn't racing, though. That's the thing, at this point none of it surprised me anymore. It just settled like a weight I'd already agreed to carry. I played the next clip. This time it was a conversation between us. I had forgotten I'd left the recorder running in the study. Me, you've been gone a lot lately. Sarah, it's work, Mark. I've told you that. Me, every weekend? Sarah laughs. If you don't trust me, just say that. But don't act like I need permission to have a life. I could hear myself sigh in the background. I remembered feeling like I was the crazy one, like I was the villain in my own home. But now, with time and distance, I could hear what I couldn't before: dismissal, contempt, the casual cruelty of someone who had already decided they were done but didn't have the courage to leave. Another recording. Her again, this time talking to someone. I still don't know who. He's so nice, it's exhausting. Like, I just want to scream at him sometimes. But he'd probably offer to help me scream better. She laughed again, louder this time. Dan's not like that. He doesn't look at me like I'm broken. He makes me feel wanted, desired. With Mark, it's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm already buried, and he's just slowly piling on the dirt. I let that one play twice, not because I liked it, because I wanted to be sure I was hearing it right. Buried. That was how she saw me. Not a partner. Not a man she once stood next to in front of all our friends and promised forever to. But a coffin. I spent the next hour going through the rest. Some were short snippets of sarcasm. A few were longer. None of them made her look like the woman I'd married. But here's what gutted me more than the insults. The joy. She was happy in those recordings. Carefree. Unfiltered. Like she'd found the version of herself she liked better. And I was just the reminder of who she used to be. Every time she talked about Dan, her voice softened. She giggled. She used that voice she hadn't used with me in years. It was like listening to someone in love, with someone else. At some point, I realized I wasn't angry. Not in the way you'd expect. I didn't want to yell or call her names. I just felt this deep, heavy mourning. Not for her. Not even for us. For me. For the man I'd allowed myself to become while trying to keep a broken thing from falling apart. I used to be funny. I used to write. I used to have friends I saw more than once a year. And somehow, I'd given it all up piece by piece just to hold on to a woman who'd stopped holding on to me a long time ago. And then came the last recording. It was from a morning when I'd been out running errands. I must have left the recorder on by accident. Or maybe part of me wanted to hear what she said when she thought she was alone. She was humming, making coffee, talking to someone on the phone. No, he's not here. Probably out buying light bulbs or something. A pause. I'm serious. I think he's trying to surprise me with a new vacuum. His idea of romance. More laughter. Honestly, I'm starting to think he knows. But he won't say anything. He'll just disappear quietly. That's what he does. He folds. Folded. That one word haunted me for days. Because it was true. I had folded. Over and over again. To keep her happy. To avoid fights. To protect something I thought was worth protecting. And in the process, I'd made myself small. Easier to step over. But not anymore. When I finally closed the folder, I sat back and stared at the ceiling. There was no more wondering. No more guessing. No more maybe I'm wrong. I knew who she was now, and I knew who I'd become. So I pulled out the second envelope, the one I hadn't finished writing yet, and placed the flash drive inside it. I wrote one line on the front. You don't have to listen. But if you do, don't lie to yourself afterward. That was it. No revenge. No final scream. Just the raw, quiet truth. And a line in the sand she couldn't pretend didn't exist. 2 days after I disappeared, Sarah guessed the password to the locked file. Stay. It was the word I'd whispered once when she turned from me to check her phone. Inside was my final letter, not about her betrayal, but about how I vanished in my own marriage. How my laughter left the kitchen. How we became I. I told her I forgave, not for her, but for me. To let go. To finally breathe again. By the time she read it, I was in Portland, living above a bookstore, writing again. Sarah stayed in the house, alone. Her files were locked behind a password she'd never guess. The name of the book I once told her saved me. She called friends, family, anyone. But they all told her the same thing. I was gone. What she saw as a setback was really the collapse of everything she thought she controlled. And I started living.